All right, today we are going to unpack Ray Dalio's incredible study on why great powers, why empires rise and fall. He's developed this really powerful lens for looking at the massive repeating cycles of history that are, believe it or not, shaping our world right now. So let's just dive right in.
So let me ask you a question. Does the world feel a little off-kilter to you lately? You know, like the old rules just don't quite apply anymore? Well, if you've been sensing that kind of uncertainty, you are definitely not imagining things. And according to investor Ray Dalio, there is a very clear reason for that feeling.
You see, he points to three enormous forces all coming together at the exact same time. First, you have staggering amounts of debt and interest rates at or near zero, which really limits how you can stimulate the economy. Second, there are these huge wealth gaps inside countries that are creating a ton of social and political conflict. And then there's the big one, a rising power, in this case China, which is directly challenging the world's leading power, the United States.
But here's the absolute central idea of his whole framework. These things aren't just chaotic, random events happening all at once. Nope, they're all predictable parts of a massive cycle, one that has repeated itself over and over and over again throughout history.
And this corkscrew is the perfect way to picture it. Look, over the long haul, humanity absolutely moves forward. We innovate, our living standards get better, but that progress is not a smooth, straight line up. It happens in these dramatic cycles. Boom and bust, peace and war, rising and falling empires. And the key thing to understand is that we are living through one of the major turns of that corkscrew right now.
So, what's really driving these cycles? I mean, what are the actual mechanics behind a nation's rise and its eventual fall? Well, Dalio's model breaks it all down into some really clear, measurable components.
Dalio's model tracks a country's power across these 8 key areas. And you gotta understand, they're all connected. It's like a feedback loop. A great education system leads to more innovation, right? That innovation drives the economy, and that economy can then fund a powerful military. You can almost think of these as the vital signs of an empire.
Now, the crucial insight here, the thing you really have to get, is that these strengths don't just move around randomly. They actually rise and fall in a pretty predictable sequence. Education, for example, is a classic leading indicator. You invest in your people, you're going to see the rewards for decades. But something like having the world's reserve currency, well, that's a lagging indicator. That's the very last thing to go, almost like an echo of the power that a country used to have.
And because this sequence is so predictable, it means that every great power in history basically follows the same classic story arc. It's kind of like watching a 3-act play unfold.
So, Act 1 is the ascent. This is where a nation builds its fundamentals. You know, good education, a strong work ethic, keeping debt low. Act 2 is the top. Here, the country is dominant, it's prosperous, it's enjoying all the rewards of its success. But it also gets expensive. People might get a little complacent, and it starts borrowing like crazy. And that right there plants the seeds for Act 3, the decline. And this is a really painful period, marked by huge debts, a lot of internal fighting, and of course a challenge from a new, hungrier rival.
Now, I mentioned that thing about the reserve currency, and we need to talk about it because it is an absolute game changer. A reserve currency, like the US dollar is today, is basically the world's default money for trade and for savings, and holding that position gives a country an almost unbelievable amount of power. And here's why it matters so much. If you have the reserve currency, you can basically just print money to pay your bills and fund your economy. But if you don't have it, you have to earn every single bit of that foreign cash, which leaves you way more vulnerable in a crisis. It's this incredible advantage, often called the exorbitant privilege of being the world's top dog.
Okay, so that's the historical engine, right? We have this repeating 3-act cycle, and it's driven by these clear measures of power. So the big question is, where are we in that cycle right now? Well, in Dalio's own words, the last big cycle ended in 1945. That's when the new American-led world order began. That was over 75 years ago. So his model suggests that we are now deep into that 3rd act, showing all the classic signs of being in the later stages of one of these major cycles.
And wow, this one chart really puts it all into perspective. What you're seeing here is the relative power of empires going back 500 years, all based on those 8 measures we just talked about. You can so clearly see the rise and fall of the Dutch and then the British. But now look really closely at the far right of the chart. You can see the United States line appears to be peaking, while China's is on this incredibly steep upward path. This is a visualization of the exact power shift that Dalio's model is talking about.
So what do we do with this information? I mean, does this mean the future is already written and we're doomed? No, not at all. The whole point of this framework isn't to be some kind of crystal ball. And this is the real takeaway. The model isn't about predicting a specific outcome. It's about giving us a map. By understanding these timeless, universal mechanics of cause and effect, we can just see the forces shaping our world much more clearly, and hopefully navigate what's coming a lot more wisely.
This table really boils it all down to a simple comparison. On one side, you have ascending powers. They're lean, they're focused, low debt, smaller wealth gaps, they're investing in the future. On the other side, declining powers. They tend to be burdened by the past, high debt, deep internal divisions, and an overextended military. It's a powerful checklist for looking at the world through this historical lens.
And all of this leaves us with one final thought. We've seen how empires rise and fall, and how a new world order always emerges from the ashes of the old one. So if history really is our map, then the question for us isn't if change is coming. The real question is what adaptations will be required of all of us to build the next, hopefully more prosperous and peaceful cycle.